Hello, Tuscan. Welcome to this talk on Artemis, the NASA initiative to send people back into space to go back to the moon and hopefully further. My name is Brenda Hutner. I am a NASA Solar System Ambassador. That is a volunteer program run out of JPL in California. So Artemis, we're sending people back to live in space. It is not our first time living in space. We've actually learned a lot from prior space stations. Skylab from the early 70s. Mir, the Russian space station. Actually, this one lasted 15 years with people from many countries living up to years in space. And of course, our own International Space Station, 100 missions so far, 240 people have been up there for varying lengths of time. In fact, ISS is having their 20th anniversary of occupation this month, so happy anniversary, ISS. But now I want to talk about Artemis. And a lot of Artemis started when there was a directive called Space Policy Directive 1, SPD 1, that said we are going to go back to the moon. And that happened in 2017. In 2019, there was a directive that said not only are we going back to the moon, but we're going to put the first American woman, the next American man on the South Pole, an area people haven't been to before, and we're going to do it by 2024. NASA has been instructed to use all means necessary. So that's what we're going to talk about here. Artemis is a two-phase project. Phase one is we're going to get people on the moon, and that's supposed to happen by 2024. Phase two is to have a sustainable presence. In other words, people can stay there for longer periods of time, both on and around the moon. And it's the around the moon part that's going to be the most interesting. And that's where we're going to have people staying for longer terms. It's a little bit confusing because this is phase one and phase two of Artemis. But we also have Artemis missions 1, 2, and 3 that are part of Artemis phase 1. So here's the overview of phase 1. That's where we're going to go to the moon before 2020 or by 2020. And you can see here there's a definite plan. We've got 3 launches for the Artemis rocket. The first one will be go to the moon and orbit and come back. The second one will send people on that rocket. And the third one, on the far right of this slide here, will hopefully go to actual gateway as part of the thing. So what do we have? Artemis 1, the very first one, scheduled to launch in November of 2021, so about a year from now, will take off from Earth. That's, if you look real close, there's little red numbers. And it will go off to orbit the moon. That's the orange thing. It will then come back, will turn into the purple string, which comes back, turns into blue, and then lands back on Earth. This Artemis 1 will not have people on it, but it will have a variety of CubeSat experiments. CubeSats are the really tiny little spacecraft that can do specific individual experiments. And so if we can do that successfully, then the next step we will start building the way that we're going to stay in place out there. So we're going to get out to the moon with something called the Space Launch System. And SLS, because NASA loves its acronyms, SLS has actually been under development for 8 or 9 years now. It was initially part of something called Exploration Mission 1, EM1, back in 2012. And Block 1 is simply the first of the SLS that's planned to be launched. There's actually a number of SLS configurations. The idea was to build something that could be used for multiple purposes, whether it has crew or not, whether it has just cargo. There's all these different configurations based on how much the payload is going to weigh. They can configure it in different ways. The first one, SLS Block 1, is the first one. And here's a little expanded graphic of what that comprises. RS-25 engines, there'll be 4 of them. It'll have some rocket boosters. It'll have a propulsion stage. And if you look on the right of this graphic here, it has the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle. And that's actually something that's been in development for quite a while. So here it is in Ohio, Sandusky, Ohio, just this past February. This is the Orion Crew Module. Started development in 2006 under the Exploration Mission 1 program, built by Lockheed Martin and Airbus. You can't really see the scale of this, so I've got a breakout graphic here that shows you the different components. And on the right here, there's the chairs where it says crew seats. This will take 4 people. It can sustain a crew for up to 3 weeks, although it doesn't take nearly that long to get to the moon. It can dock and hang out for, supply up to 6 months up there. And then also interesting in here is the spacesuits are a pressurized backup. So if something does go wrong, the astronauts can get in the spacesuits, which can last them up to 6 days in case of emergency. So we have learned some lessons over the years and are working to make things as safe as possible. The other thing about Orion Crew Module is if you see the top where it says docking hatch, that's the piece that's going to dock with the gateway. So here is the gateway logo, because you got to start with a logo, right? And gateway is the lunar outpost that will actually orbit the moon in 2024 through 28. They'll be building it. And that's where the astronauts can actually live and work while going from the gateway to the moon and back. So here is a breakout of the gateway modules. Different modules will connect, sort of like Legos, they'll all connect. The far left, we have the propulsion going through the different components. There's logistics and airlock and sample collectors and additional telecommunications capabilities, etc. You can see here on the far right, that's our Orion Crew Module that we've already seen, and then different components will connect together, sort of connect together. So the one that we're most interested in, well, that I'm most interested in, is the habitation module. So here is a graphic of what it will look like. The Orion spacecraft will come up and dock with you see the open port on the edge of Gateway there. And there on the right, you see the habitation module, or what will probably be the habitation module. And here's a close-up that shows it a little more detailed. And here is the actual habitation module, which was built based on the Cygnus module, which is a thing from Northrop Grumman. It's very similar to what they've already done for the ISS, so it's sort of proven technologies. These are people standing inside it. It's going to be very comfortable for the astronauts, and it will have all the life support, a viewing window, sleeping quarters, all kinds of things in there. Habitation module. Then we have to get from the gateway to the moon and back. And a year and a half ago, February 2019, they had a industry forum where everybody got together that was interested in building the human landing system. And they spent some time identifying what that might look like. It might be one piece that goes from gateway to the moon and back, but they did not think at that time that was viable. It might be a piece that gets you down there and another piece that brings you back up. Or it might be a three-stage thing where there's a separate piece that actually lets you transfer from the gateway to the human landing system. And just earlier this year, NASA announced the three competitors, the three chosen companies for the human landers. So the first is SpaceX, who chose to go with the one-piece unit. You can see here it's pretty tall, and that little open door in the middle, you can see there's like a little elevator with people coming down out of it. Dynetics is another company, and they actually have a bunch of subcontractors, each of whom have expertise in the various components of the lander. As you can tell by the scaled people there, it's a much smaller unit that will be able to launch from the gateway, go to the moon, and then bring the astronauts back. And the third vendor is Blue Origin. This one is another team approach where Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Draper, companies like that are all getting together. And these are all companies who have done this kind of thing before. And each of those people will take one component of the landing system. And as you can tell by the scale here of the people, this one's a little bit smaller yet. The additional systems, now we've covered the launch vehicle, the spacecraft itself, the gateway, the human landing system, but that's not anywhere near the only things. We have guidance and navigation, propulsion, data handling, power issues, all that stuff still underway. When you add in people, there's a whole bunch more stuff, medical, food, water, waste, all these things that have to get figured out. NASA has actually created a giant plan, and it is called the Next Space Technologies for Exploration Partnerships 2, or Next Step 2. I told you NASA loves acronyms. And this is a quite lengthy document, very detailed. This is the document that solicits vendors to create proposals that meet the technical requirements. That's really interesting to read, and I've given you the URL here. But I recommend starting with the Artemis plan, which is a much smaller document with very pretty pictures in it. It's still 30 or 40 pages, but it gives you a better high-level overview of what the plan is and what the components will be. So they're both worthwhile looking up. The URLs are there. Like all NASA stuff, it's just free to download. And here are some other URLs you might find interesting. The Artemis Program pages where they post updates. The next step, that's the solicitation, and the Artemis plan. And then one of my favorite sites, images.nasa.gov, where you can look at all the images they've ever taken and sort them by date or type or anything you want, images, video, and audio files available to the public for free. So that's Artemis. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of TUSCON.